So this will be under the data analysis for your research. We will be talking purely about statistics since all of the groups have quantitative research as research design. So meron talaga tayong numerical data here. And for you to analyze and interpret your data, we need the help of statistics. So we will have a review of the different statistical tools that we can use. I don't know last time if I have given you a review about measures of central tendency and variations, but if ever I was not able to include those things, singit ko siya this morning, okay, sa discussion natin. So look at your papers now and sa part ng data analysis, what will be the statistical test that you are going to use in order for you to answer your statement of the problem. So number one, you have to properly identify what type of data are you going to collect. Will that be nominal? Remember, when you say nominal, these data are non-numerical. Instead, we have categories or classifications. So the best example there is the research na merong question in the statement of the problem asking about the demographic profile of the student. So like, or the respondent. So like when you ask them, what is their sex, male ba or female? So we only have categories. Again, we don't have numerical values. Now, second, we have the ordinal, right? And from the word itself, ordinal, we have ranking or order here. So we have numerical values that are arranged according to ranks, or this can be like Likert scale. Now we have numerical values or numerical data, but these numbers are just representative of verbal interpretations, like when you have sentences in your questionnaire and then you have their strongly agree, neutral, and so on. Okay, and then lastly, we have the scale. Let's just make the scale, I mean the interval and the ratio as one, since they do overlap with each other. It's just that the other one has true meaningful zero, and then the other one don't have. Okay, so yung scale, ito yung totoong numerical data. These are real numbers, and most of the time these numbers are generated through experimentations in the laboratory. So again, that's the first thing that you need to know before you can decide what statistical test are you going to use. Okay? Now, the second one is, magde-decide tayo based on your statement of the problem. So look at your statement of the problem. I think last time I let you identify the different statistical tool that you're going to use based on the SOP. So like number one, if you have SOP like what is the demographic profile, your statistical tool there will only be frequency distribution and percentage. Na yung may mga question dyan na what is the mean score, or what is the level of knowledge, what is the mean hair length of the animals. From the question itself, you can easily identify na the statistical tool or the statistical test is the mean. Okay, so si mean, median, and mode are all measures of central tendency. When you say measures of central tendency, we are identifying the center of the distribution. So most of the time, we are going to use the mean, but if ever you have outliers or you have extreme values, like when you give a test of 100 items and most of the scores are 80 to 100, that there is this someone who got a score of 2. So that would be very far from the usual scores. That's what we call extreme values or outliers. Now, if that happens to your collected data, the mean cannot be a representative. So it cannot be the center of the distribution, since this outlier will pull down or pull up, depende, your mean. So that's the time median and mode can be used for the central, for the measures of central tendency. And then another one that you have to be mindful also is the measures of variation. So remember, in research, you have lots of respondents, lots of participants or subjects, and even those who will be conducting research will not just do the experiment in one testing only. That's what we call trials or replicates. You need to do the same procedure at the same time if that is a replicate. Now, we are making sure that all the collected data will be precise. So that's the time now that we use the measures of variation, and the most common measures of variation used nowadays for research is the standard deviation. So how do we interpret the results of the result of standard deviation? The larger the standard deviation, it means your data are not precise. Okay, hindi siya precise. So I think I have told you that there was this group in research sa pharma. Now when we had our final defense, when the panelists look at their result, we saw there na ang standard deviation nila is umabot ng 79. So that is very big for a standard deviation, and it means that there is something wrong with their data. Bakit hindi precise? And that was experimental. So bakit hindi nag-agree with each other yung data nila. So anong ginawa doon? Siyempre pinaulit sila. And that will be difficult, since when you repeat an experiment, you need new sets of animals, and syempre you will have madodoble ang effort, ang time needed, and yung gastos. Okay? So make sure na precise yung data natin. Yeah, gastos. Ang gastos jud na siya. So if you have an initial data collected, you can always run your collected data in the JASP, or if you can do the manual computation, that's okay. I have no problem with that. Or you can just use Excel. But I'm not that knowledgeable with Excel man good. I can do statistical computations with Excel, but hindi lahat. Okay? Pwede nyo siyang i-run. You can have an initial testing for the collected data if you will have a precise data. Yung mga magsa-survey, ganun pa rin yun. Like you have 100 respondents, and then you can check if their answers will be precise or you will have outliers. Okay? Now, we will start here with the testing of hypothesis. I believe all groups have hypothesis, no? Meron tayong hypothesis. Now, when you say hypothesis, that's an educated guess. That's a tentative solution or explanation of a certain phenomenon or problem. That's the meaning of hypothesis. But take note of the word educated, because you just don't propose a solution or an explanation to a problem. You have to have a background reading about that, and you have to have a reference. So where is your solution coming from? That's hypothesis class. And in research, we are doing, or we are making hypothesis that is testable. Okay? Kasi we need to challenge our hypothesis if that is correct or not. So that is the reason why in your findings or in your discussion, you really have to state there whether you are rejecting or accepting your hypothesis. The panelist will be really looking for that, especially in the discussion section. What will be your decision? In the first part of your paper, you are proposing this hypothesis. And in the last part, you really have to decide whether to accept or to reject that. Now, under the testing of hypothesis, we will be doing inferential statistics here. So hindi lang siya descriptive statistics. Remember, descriptive statistics is just purely describing the data, or you may just summarize the data. Just like when you have your frequency distribution table with your demographic profile, you are just simply summarizing the demographic profile of your respondents. But when you say you are doing hypothesis testing, this requires sophisticated mathematical na tools in order for you to analyze and interpret the numerical data. And we have like at least 3 types of question that we are going to answer using the results of inferential statistics. So when you look at your statement of the problem, and see there whether you have questions like, is there a significant difference? Or meron din namang, is there a significant relationship? So sometimes it will be, is there a significant association? But most of the time that will be, is there a significant relationship? Now, the third one is actually yung sa predictive na part. Like you are dealing with factors. Again, you are dealing with factors that can predict a certain phenomenon. So the question will be, are the factors predictive of something? Okay, so that's another set of question for the SOP. But let us give emphasis first to statistical tools that will answer, is there a significant difference or relationship na question. Okay, so I'll be using this slide. This is not mine. This is not mine. This is from Dr. Sherwin Fortugalisa during our research capability building. We will be using JASP so that we will not have problems with intellectual property, since the SPSS require license, and that will be very expensive. Now, this part is for those who will be using questionnaire and will be using Likert scale for their data. So like if you have this one, like you have sentences, and then the respondents will just select whether they strongly agree, disagree, or whatever, they are neutral with that certain statement. Now, this is for the interpretation na part. How do you get the interval to get the mean range? Okay, so this will be classed the formula highest scale minus the lowest scale divided by the number of scale class. So if you use the Likert scale, di ba? Sa Likert scale, you will have five items there. So the lowest scale is 1, so that's 5 minus 1, and then divided by the number of scale, we have 5. So that will be 0.80, and that will be the interval. So you will start with 1 to 1.80, 1.81 to 2.60. So ano ang mga ito? Ito yung ginagamit natin for the interpretation. So the interpretation will not be strongly agree, agree, neutral, disagree, or strongly agree. Hindi ganun yung interpretation class. Depende yan siya sa hinahanap nyo. If you are looking for the level of knowledge, so maybe you can have here high, yung kanilang level, like very high or something, excellent. Ito high lang. Moderate na level of knowledge, ito low or very low. So yun yung magiging interpretation. The strongly agree, agree, neutral, disagree, and strongly disagree will just be the answers of your respondents, but that's not how you are going to interpret. You have to come up with a scale and verbal interpretation. Again, the verbal interpretation will be dependent on what type of question you have in your statement of the problem. So alangan naman ang question nyo, what is the level of knowledge of the respondents? And your answer will be strongly agree, agree, and strongly agree. Example, the mean is 3.50. Hindi pwedeng disagree or agree sila. Paano mo yun i-explain na your question is the level of knowledge? So look at your papers if you have this one. If you have this one already, I believe you do have. Pero saan galing yung mga interval? That is our formula. Highest scale minus the lowest scale divided by the number of scale. Okay? You have questions? Wala. Sure. Sure na. Let me just open my JASP. Kasi matagal din talaga mag-open yung JASP class. And sometimes, pag hindi kaya ng inyong, hindi kaya ng inyong laptop, maghahang kasi yung laptop ninyo. Yeah, sa Likert scale. Ano pala yung yung questioning? I'm not familiar man good of all the studies since diba I handle medtech, and then I do check the paper of the RadTech, the PT also, since again I'm handling the research office, so sa kadaghan sa research mo na pero may kumapangutanaw sa ganun study ninyo. Dili na ako makahinumdum except sa mga under jud sa akuha kay since kato naga-focus jud ko sa under sa ako, pero mga under sa ako wala na ko maalala. Yung herd immunity, yung acceptance sa vaccine. You have your Likert scale there. Meron ba kayong Likert scale? Di ko alam kasi yung yung questionnaire. Di din yan dumaan sa akin kasi for validation. And then actually, I did not accept validation this year since I don't have time. I don't have time for that. This one is is for the Likert scale, for the interpretation. You coordinate with your advisor if ever like you are confused on what are you going to do with your numerical data. I believe they know that. Okay. Hindi ko alam kasi kung ano yung type of questioning ninyo. So, I cannot answer. But this one is for the Likert scale to get the interval for the verbal interpretation. Now, let's move on. Testing hypothesis about two independent groups. Okay, so we have here two independent sample t-test first, which is a parametric test. Let's have a little review of parametric and non-parametric. When you say parametric, number one, we need to satisfy the requirements first before we can really use the parametric tests. So what are the requirements or the assumptions? Number one, your data should be normally distributed. Okay, that if we are going to graph your data, we will have a bell-shaped curve. Okay. Now, if you have outliers or extreme values in your data, that will make your data not normally distributed. So it can be skewed when graphed, either positive or negatively skewed. Now, another thing that we need to satisfy is that kailangan the two sets of samples from the two groups will have equal variances. Again, kailangan may equal sila na variance. So, dalawa na yun. Number one, normally distributed. Number two, kailangan may equal variance silang dalawa. Okay? Yan yung kailangan tandaan natin with a parametric test. But we can always check that one even in JASP whether our data is normally distributed or not, or if they have equal variances. But you have to remember that t-test is a parametric test. You cannot use this if hindi yung dalawa hindi normally distributed and hindi equal ang variance. And at the same time, you cannot use the t-test if your data is not a scale. Okay? Whether interval or ratio, dapat scale yung inyong data. If your data is nominal or ordinal, you cannot also use the t-test or all the other parametric tests. Okay, now when do we use the t-test? Independent sample t-test. If we have two independent groups, now we are comparing. Meaning, if you have a question there na is there a significant difference between two groups only? Two groups lang ha, we will be using t-test. And pag independent yung two groups na ito ang gagamitin, the independent sample t-test. When you say independent groups, the scores of this group has nothing to do with the score of the other group. So, hindi sila connected. You have different na subjects here or respondents, and then different din yung subjects sa second group. Okay, now since this is a parametric test, we will be using the mean as the measure of central tendency and the standard deviation for the measure of variation. Okay, so again, for independent sample t-test, our null hypothesis will be baliktad. Ina-assume natin whether the two groups are equal or not equal. Okay? Yan yung when you say difference, diba? We are comparing the two. Kung meron kayong two drugs, we are comparing whether their efficacy are equal or not. Yan yung ibig sabihin ng ating independent sample t-test. We will be answering there is no significant difference or there is a significant difference. Baliktad ito ha. The null is stated in the negative form and the alternative hypothesis is stated in the positive form. Now, if you are going to do a manual computation of the t-test, this will be the formula, but I will not require you to do that. It's okay lang ito, class, if you will have the experimentation with two groups and then yung subject ninyo is like 5-5 lang. Okay, 5 sa first group, 5 sa second group, or 10 and then another 10 sa second group. But how about those groups, class, na yung kanilang respondents ay umabot na ng 100? So, paano siya i-manual computation? Okay? So again, we will be using the JASP, or you can actually use the Excel if the JASP will not really run in your gadgets there, whether laptop or desktop. We will have the Excel later. I'll try to do that sa Excel. Now, take note of this. The most important thing is you have to be able to interpret the result. So it is important for you, wait lang, kay your connection is unstable. So that your connection is unstable, it means maputol akong giingon sa inyo. Okay, again, our decision rule here is you are going to reject the null hypothesis if the p-value associated with the computed p-value is less than 0.05. So again, ito yung pinaka-importante dyan. If the p-value given to you by the JASP software is less than 0.05, what are you going to do? You have to reject the null hypothesis. Okay? I do not forget that. Pero if it's the other way around, if the p-value na nakuha nyo is more than 0.05, that's the time you accept the null hypothesis. So dalawa lang talaga yung magiging decision. The conclusion would state either you're going to reject or accept the null hypothesis. Ito talaga yung pinaka-importante sa lahat. Kasi ito yung hahanapin. Remember, we are proposing a solution to a problem. And kailangan, at the end of the research, kailangan meron tayong decision if we are really going to accept your proposal or not. Okay? So, please take this by heart. Kasi pangutanon mo sa panel sa final defense. Bakit nyo ni-reject? Bakit nyo in-accept? Should be able to answer that. So let's go back to statistics if you're going to answer that kind of question from your panelists. Okay? Questions or clarifications? Sino dito yung gagamit ng t-test? Again. Sino dito yung gagamit ng t-test for their study? Wala. Meaning walang two groups lang yung pagkukunan ng difference. We will have more than that. Okay? Kung more than that, syempre we will be using ANOVA. Pero we will talk about ANOVA some other time. Now, this one is an example. A study was conducted by a group of fourth-year pharmacy students in XXX school to determine the level of male and female community pharmacists' awareness on antimicrobial dispensing. A standardized survey questionnaire was adopted from an international research in 1 to 5 Likert scale. Basta Likert scale that should be 5 or more, or 5 to 7 na yung pagpipilian nila sa survey. Kapag less than 5, tinanggal nyo yung neutral example. That is called Likert type only. Kasi the Likert scale is designed to have 5 choices or more. So what are we going to look here for this study? Determine the level of male and female community pharmacists' awareness on antimicrobial dispensing. So if you're going to draw the conceptual framework of this study, the independent variable will be male and female. So as you can see, we only have two groups here. The sex will be the independent variable. This is being controlled in the study. So in the questionnaire, you will be separating the males and also the females. So again, we are manipulating this, we are controlling this. Now, the outcome variable is the level of, awareness, level of awareness on antimicrobial dispensing. Okay, if sino ba yung mas knowledgeable, the male ba or the female pharmacist? So when we are going to make the statement of the problem or the research questions, we have syempre the first one, what is the level of awareness ng mga babaeng community pharmacist? We will also ask of what is the level of awareness ng male community pharmacist on antimicrobial dispensing. So these two, okay, will just be using descriptive statistics. So what is the level? Though hindi yan siya talagang stinate na it's the mean, but automatically pag mag-a-ask tayo ng level of awareness, since we have lots of questions in your questionnaire, we will be getting the mean. And at the same time, the standard deviation, if ever, meron bang nag-vary ba talaga yung level of awareness ng mga pharmacists. Okay? So this type of study is non-experimental by nature. It's descriptive and at the same time comparative. Kasi we will be comparing the level of awareness of both the male and the female. So you will have a third question, is there a significant difference? Okay, wait lang. Excuse me. Nabilin ang pahumot nila. Nabilin ang pahumot sa tao sa balay paghawa nila gaina. Solo flight ko actually sa balay. Kaya nagtrabaho ang tanan, nag-eskwela akong manghod face to face. Nabilin ilang pahumot. Gaina pa actually akong pagmata na ako, kasi syempre sayo sila. Pagmata na ako mo din ang akong nasimhutan, and I'm very sensitive with smell. Extent of influence. Ma'am, extent of influence ang SOP. Yeah. For like example, ang question dito number 1, what is the extent of, answer question ninyo, extent of influence? Yes, that will also use the mean and the standard deviation. So the mean will be used to calculate the answers of your respondents per question. Per question yan siya ha. Ilalagay nyo siya sa table. Tapos sa baba, you will have the total mean. Let me check if I have an example here. Kung paano nyo siya gagawin. Wait lang. This one. Okay. Let's see their SOP first. SOP, what is the demographic profile? What is the level of influence? And is there a relationship? Though this one is there a relationship? But nevertheless, let's just have the first and the second question. Demographic profile and nadaot din na naka box mong good ni. Anyway, sa result section of your paper, you're going to arrange the findings according to the SOP also. So you will have again parang introductory paragraph of this section, and kung nakita ninyo, this is their table 1. And this will be answering their first question, what is the demographic profile? So as you can see, this is just a frequency distribution table and percentage. Though meron silang maraming table sila sa ano ha, it doesn't mean na SOP number 1 isang table ka rin lang. Kung kaya siyang i-fit in for one table, why not? But in this case, like what is the demographic profile in terms of educational attainment, if you're going to combine this with the occupation and the other pa na demographic profile, medyo libog na ang table, no? So we opted to separate this one. So they have their table number 1 only for the educational attainment, followed by a textual presentation. So it is not really necessary that you will have a very long textual presentation, as long as you can explain the numbers found in your table, then okay na yan siya. This is how they present their demographic profile. For those na merong questions about demographic profile. And then take note of this. They have now the mean level of medical fake news and fear-mongering. Ang gagawin nyo for those na may mga questionnaires, you really have to include all questions or all statement there. Okay? Hindi kasi lahat questions, di ba? Yung sa inyo, ang iba, statement lang, and they have to choose whether they agree or disagree. So again, you have to list down all the questions and you have to get the mean for each question. Okay? Kailangan mo pang kunin yung lahat ng mean dyan, and you may have the verbal description. Diba? Pag one, that's disagreed, neutral, strongly disagree, and so on. But the interpretation will be different, since we are talking here about the level. So hindi ka pwedeng magsabi na the level is disagree. You really have to make the interval, get the interval first using the formula I gave you a while ago, and come up with the interpretation. So as you can see, like this one, 5G mobile networks spread COVID-19, the answers of the respondents is 1.91 lang yung mean. Sa lahat ng respondents, ito ha, if you have 300 respondents, this will be the mean of the 300 respondents. So most of them disagree, and ang interpretation yan ng level of influence is low. Remember yung question nila sa number 2, what is the level of influence of medical fake news and fear-mongering? Okay? So yun, ang gagawin, isa-isahin. Kung naamoy 20 ka questions din ha, 20 po na tanan. And sa last part, we will have the total mean. So total mean ng lahat ng yan. And the same thing, we will be interpreting it. Pero sa interpretation, the most important thing is this one. Para sa total mean, ano yung interpretation. Okay? But you may actually take note of like remarkable results here with the statement. Kasi baka meron kang result na low silang lahat, merong isang high. So you need to highlight that high part of your result, if ever meron lang. Okay? So that is also true for their next question. What is the level of vaccine confidence among the millennials? So again, you also have to list down all the statements that you have, get the mean for each statement for all the respondents of the study. You may get the standard deviation also. So first part, wala din sila standard deviation. You may get the standard deviation also, the verbal description, and then again come up with your own interpretation using the range na na-compute ninyo. Okay, that's how you tabulate the findings of your study here using the mean and the standard deviation. Questions about this? before we'll really move on with the t-test. So, gamit nila din hina. Statistical test. R values. Pearson R. Okay. They used Pearson R here. Sa interpretation na part, sa mean mag-base. Yeah, sa mean. Like this one. Ano ito? Mean level of medical fake news. So ito yung kanilang textual presentation. As shown in table 4, the total mean is 2.42, which implies a verbal description of disagree and an interpretation of a low level. A low level indicates or suggests that respondents do not readily believe medical fake news and are not easily steered by fear-mongering. Ano lang? I remember the discussion, the interpretations, and all the other things is to be included in the discussion part. Okay? Pearson R pala ito kasi relationship pa lang hinahanap dito. So, hindi ito t-test. Kasi ito, di ba yung question nila, yung last question nila, is there a significant relationship between medical fake news and fear-mongering and the level of vaccine confidence of the millennials? So, since relationship and ano ito class, though they are using Likert scale and supposedly Likert scale is an ordinal data, but since we are getting the mean and yung mean yung kinukuhanan natin ng relationship, you can use the parametric test here. Pearson R is a parametric test. Okay? So yan yung tandaan ninyo. If we are going to get the mean, that will fall, pwede mong gamitin si parametric test dito. So you can use t-test if you are looking for the significant difference of two variables. Okay? Questions or clarification? Sinabutan na ha, basig desig ko yaw-yaw din hi. Tapos ang ending, I don't want you to to have difficulties sa final defense with regards sa results ng inyong study. So para bisag balik-taron ang mga pangutana din ha, di tanin maglibog ha. Okay? So again, we have here, is there a significant difference in the level of awareness on antimicrobial dispensing between male and community pharmacists? We will be using JASP here. I will show you later. Now take note of the assumptions that we need to satisfy in order for us to really decide that we are going to use the independent sample t-test. So number 1 again, normality of the distribution. Number 2, equality of variance. Dapat equal yung variance ng study natin. When we say variance class, that's the square of the standard deviation. So again, we have to get the square of the standard deviation. Yan yung variance na tinatawag. And then, independence of observations. Remember, this is independent sample t-test, so that the two groups should not be related. Just like when you have male and female pharmacists, those two groups are different and their answers will be independent from each other. And then number 4, syempre no outliers. When you say normal data or normal distribution, we don't really have outliers or extreme values here. And number 5, random sampling. Though sometimes we can also use t-test even if we don't do random sampling, kasi some of you may have convenient sampling or the other one, purposive sampling in your sampling technique. And then the interval group, independent variable is group. So like isang group ang male, isang group ang female. And then the dependent variable should at least be interval. So hindi natin pwedeng gamitin dito yung nominal mo na data or ordinal na data. Okay? So let me just open Let me just open This one. Let me check if this is really the example. Or this one. Okay. So ito yung results, for example. Instead of track example, this is the sex, right? Ito yung sex, male or female, and then ito yung level of awareness nila. So, syempre, mean na ito. Kasi, di ba, meron tayong maraming questions, like 1 to 10 yung question natin. So, ito na yung mean ng respondent na ito, na lalaki. Ito din yung mean ng kanyang level of awareness. Before we'll go on to just, let's try to have the Excel first. Pero itry ko lang ha, kasi hindi talaga ako, nito. Hindi ko talaga masyadong kapa itong Excel. Pag mag-Excel ka kasi, lagay mo sa isang box kung saan mo gustong ilagay yung result. Example dyan, dito ko siya ilagay. And then click FX. And then hanapin natin si t-test. This is the t-test. Yeah. Okay. This will be the t-test. Click OK. And then, my problem is, magkaiba. Magkaiba kasi yung pag-arrange ng data. Kasi pag Excel yung gagamitin mo, class, i-X ko muna ha. Pag hindi mag-run ang inyong just dyan, pag Excel yung inyong gagamitin, hindi ganito yung pagka-encode ng data. Talagang ihihiwalay mo silang dalawa. So like isang column si female, isang column si male. So dito yung mga scores nila. So I cannot pala do the t-test here. So please be mindful on how are you going to encode your data. Basig na human na kag-encode tapos dili day siya. Dili day siya pwede. Again, kung independent sample t-test and you are going to use the Excel, you're going to separate the two. The male here and then the female. Before we can compute for the t-test, kasi ganito siya. Pag i-click natin si FX, and then, asa na yung t-test? Ayan, t-test yan siya. I-okay natin. Itong RA1, ito yung para sa example sa female, ganyan. And then, RA2 para siya sa male. Okay? And then tails. I hope you can still remember the tails ng kung one-tailed test ba or two-tailed test yung gagamitin natin. Maka-remember pa or wala na, na-erase na tanan, natabunan na o say natabon din ha. Wait lang. Sige, before ta mag-istoryaan ng naging ha. Pag sinabing one-tailed test class, malalaman mo ito if depende siya sa SOP. If the not the SOP, if the hypothesis is directional, you will be doing a one-tailed test. When you say directional, you have like terms for comparison, like the female is more knowledgeable or is more aware than male. Okay? That's a hypothesis, right? Pero meron siyang direction. We are favoring the female. The females are more aware than the male. that is a directional hypothesis, and we will be doing one-tailed test there. Kasi again nga, meron tayong direction, and we will only test one tail of the distribution, and that is for the female. But if your hypothesis is non-directional, that's the time you are going to use two-tailed test. So ano yung non-directional? Wala tayong binibigyan ng favor. So kung itong level of awareness, talagang is-state lang natin na there is a difference, or like there is a significant difference between the level of awareness of the male and female pharmacist. Or if it is a null hypothesis, there is no significant difference between the level of awareness of male and female pharmacists. So again, wala siyang direction. We don't give favor sa female, we also don't give favor sa male. Again, yan yung kaibahan ng one-tailed test and two-tailed test. So in the case kasi of our t-test here, pag i-click mo kasi siya, t-test, and then na-highlight mo na lahat ng cells dyan nakasali sa group 1, na-highlight na din yung lahat for the group 2. Pipiliin mo kasi ngayon if you're going to do a one-tailed test or a two-tailed distribution. So if you have, look at your hypothesis there, if may direction ba yan or wala. But I think most of your hypothesis walang direction. So you just place here 2. Okay? 2 yan siya. And then, for the type, you are going to select whether it is a paired t-test. One is for the paired t-test. Later, or if we still have time, I'll also give a review of what paired t-test is. And then you have to state 2 if you have like independent sample t-test pero equal ang variance. Okay? Equal ang variance, and then you will be typing 3 here if you have, again, independent sample t-test pero unequal ang variance. So in this type of data, I'll be choosing 2 here. Bakit 2? Kasi I am doing an independent sample t-test. The results of the male and the female are different from each other, and I am assuming that we have equal variance here, though hindi ko pa siya tinest talaga. Okay? So, pag hindi equal yung variance, 3 ang ilagay niyo dyan ha, and then kung paired t-test ang gagawin natin, it's 1. Okay? So, that's how you use the Excel for t-test, and pag okay mo na yan, na-highlight na lahat, na-encode na lahat, ang ibibigay actually ni Excel is the p-score. The Excel will not give us the p-value. Instead, it will be the p-score. Okay? So, in the interpretation, I hope you can still remember when we had our statistics discussion, I have given you tables, right, of critical values. Doon mo siya compare. Okay? Doon sa table. And our rule for that, if the computed p-value or t-score is greater than the tabular t, you're going to reject the null hypothesis. Yan yung ating rule. If gagamit kayo ng Excel. Nagagamit ba dito ng Excel? I think kung merong kahit isa lang sa inyo that can run the JASP, I would like to suggest na mag-JASP na lang kay kapag Excel, isa-isahon mo siya, and then ikaw pa iyang ipa-decide whether you are going to do the one tail or the two tail, and then afterwards it will just give you the t-score, and you have to compare it for sa table of critical values for t-test, and then you're going to make the interpretation. Unlike sa JASP, diretso-diretso tayo. Now, how are we going to do this sa JASP? So you have here, sa JASP kasi siya per column. So ito yung scores ng lahat for the awareness. And ano siya per column with regards to your conceptual framework. This is the dependent variable, right? The awareness, and this one here is the independent variable. Now take note, class, that just only reads file in CSV format. So do not forget to save your encoded data in CSV. Okay? So pag mag-save as ka lang, and then again, CSV dapat dito sa data type ha. Hindi siya Excel. CSV, comma, delimited. Kasi pag hindi yan siya naka-CSV, just cannot read that. Mabuang kag pangita asa na imuhang file, ay dili kita niya mabasa. Okay? Now, how do we do this? Sa just, open na ako ang just, no? Kajut lang dyan. Okay. Ayan. Okay. So please open your JASP and I will add mo yung set of data na later na lang. Okay. And then everything will start here at the upper left side corner. Click this and let's find the file. Sige, ito nakabutang sa ako ang research capability ata. And then, yeah, independent sample data set. So take note of this. The data type are all Microsoft Excel, comma, separated value files, values files, or CSV format. So if we click this, will just import the data, and this is it. Naka-import na ang data. And then, you have to check whether the types of data are correct. Now, for awareness, click this one na parang ruler. You will see there the types of data. Yung parang ruler is the scale. And then yung parang, ano tawag dyan, graph. We have the ordinal. And then yung mga bilog-bilog, that's the nominal. So since these are the mean scores or mean level of awareness of each respondent, then we are going to use scale here. It will not be ordinal anymore. But for the track, remember this is a demographic profile. We don't have numerical data here. Instead, we have classification. So let's see. This one is nominal. So this is correct also. Nominal plus merong classification. Now, if everything is already set, then we can do the math. Okay? So we can run the t-test. And again, ano nga ito? Independent sample t-test. The groups are independent from each other. The results ng male is different sa result ng female. Magkaibang tao yun. So again, independent sample t-test. So just click this and then you will see this one. Okay? Now, itong variables, this will be the dependent variable. So ano nga yung dependent variables? The outcome. So 'di ba ang outcome natin is awareness. You just place it there, and then yung grouping variable will be the independent variable. So you will also transfer it here, the track, yung male and female yon. And then just wait for the just to compute. Now, ito yung ibibigay niya. Just like the Excel, you will have the t-score, okay? You will have also the t-score here. That we don't need to really use the t-test na table since we have here the p-value. Okay? We have the p-value. So this is the t-score. We will get this when we use the Excel or we are going to do manual computation. Ha? That's the time na makukuha natin si t-score. Number 1, we are going to do manual computation, and number 2, we are going to use the Excel. The DF here means the degree of freedom, and it's the number of like score that is free to vary. So ilang data yon? A total of 40 ata. And then 2 groups man siya. So, paano kukunin ang degree of freedom? N1 plus N2 kasi meron tayong dalawang grupo. May meaning ng N1 is the sample size. So, sample size for the group 1 plus sample size of the group 2 minus 2. Minus 2 kasi dalawang group. So, I think 40 yun siya lahat minus 2. So, that is 38. Ito yung lahat ng data na pwedeng mag-vary from each other. But nevertheless, you have there the p-value which is 0.974. Okay? So tingnan niyo, naka-click dito ang student p-test. That's the student p-test. The man with me is the non-parametric equivalent of the student p-test. So as the Welch. Pero let's check if this data is really normally distributed. So, anong gagawin? We can click actually the descriptives so that you can get easily the mean since you need this also. So, di ba, kailangan din natin yung mean and even the standard deviation. Itong dalawa lang. Okay, so ayan na yung 2020 yung N. And then, aside from that, itong alternative hypothesis, we are having here na group 1 is not equal to group 2. Wala tayong fini-favor, right? So, two-tailed test tayo. Kasi pag nagbigay tayo ng favor either kay group 1 or kay group 2, magiging directional na yan siya and one-tailed t-test na yung gagawin. Pero ito, kasi ang hypothesis natin, there is no significant difference between male and female. So, ito lang ang pipiliin. Group 1 is not equal to group 2. Now, assumption checks. I-check lang natin kung tama ba talaga na normally distributed yung ating collected data and at the same time, if they have equality of variance. You just click it. You just click normality and it will give you the test of normality or the Shapiro-Wilk. And later, I will also give you how are we going to interpret that. We will also use the p-value here, okay? And then we also have equality of variance. So again, we will also use the p-value in interpreting whether there is really equality or of variance or not. So, ang tawag naman sa test for equality of variances is the Levine's test. Okay? Levine's test ha, ang sa equality of variance, and then yung sa normality, we don't need to do graphing or yung pag-compute ng skewness. Ito na diretso, the Shapiro-Wilk test. And then we are going to need the p-value here. Now, in your research, if you can still remember, you can copy the table. So just click this arrow going down and then click copy and you can copy everything, the table, and paste this in your paper para diretso na lahat. Okay? Pero sa sa table ninyo, since hindi na ito kailangan actually. Itong table na ito na assumption checks and equality of variance, pwedeng wala na ito actually sa table. Kasi wala naman yung SOP asking for this too. It's just that we are doing this to really ascertain that your collected data are normally distributed and they have equal variance so that tama talaga na independent sample p-test yung ating gagawin. Okay? Now, how do we interpret this? So, okay, I hope you can see. It's a screen. Take note. We have the independent sample p-test first. Na-mention ko na how are we going to interpret that a while ago, right? When a p-value is less than or equal to 0.05, it means you have to reject your null hypothesis. Okay? I-reject mo yung null hypothesis mo kasi merong significant difference yung two groups. Okay? Pero if it's more than 0.05, you have to accept the null hypothesis. There is no significant difference between the two groups. Now, for the result of this study, the p-value is 0.974, which is higher than 0.05, meaning we have to accept the null hypothesis. Ang ibig sabihin nun, there is no significant difference between the level of awareness of the male and female community pharmacists on antimicrobial dispensing. So walang pagkakaiba daw. That's the interpretation of the t-test, the p-value that has been computed. Any question about the interpretation ng ating independent sample t-test? Meron ba? Wala. Wala. Sige. Now for the assumption checks, this one is the test for normality, the Shapiro will. We will just look if the collected data is normally distributed or not. So how do we interpret the p-value? A p-value of higher than 0.05 means that the distribution of the data set is normal. Okay? Normally distributed daw yung collected data if the p-values given here per group are higher than 0.05. So let us see. For the female, that's 0.318. Yes, that is higher. So all the collected data for the female are normally distributed. And then for the male, it's 0.390. Yes, it's also higher than 0.05. So for the assumption check na ito. Check na that the data collected are really normally distributed. So most likely we can use the t-test. But how about the test for equality of variances or the Levine's test? Ganun pa rin. A p-value of higher than 0.05 means that the variance of the data set is homogeneous. Most likely equal. So what is the p-value here for the Levine's test? It's 0.498. And again, that is higher than 0.05, which means that the variance is really equal. So we have satisfied this. And yes, we can really use the t-test for this set of data. That's how we interpret, class, the results of the independent sample t-test. Ito mga descriptives, kailangan mo din ito sa paper mo, especially sa mga questions requiring descriptive statistics only, especially the mean and the standard deviation. Okay? Any question or clarification about this? Wala. Sure. Nagyod. I hope nasundan yun kung paano siya gagawin. Now, let's summarize. When do we use that independent sample t-test? Number one, if we are comparing two groups only. We are looking for the significant difference between two groups. Okay? Number two, since t-test is a parametric test, we have to satisfy a lot of assumptions. So number one, if the data is normally distributed. Number two, if they have equal variances. Number three, if we don't have outliers. Number four, if our data is at least interval. So either interval or a ratio. Okay? So and I'm talking about the outcome variable ha, kasi yung ating independent variable kanina is a nominal scale. Okay? So again, the outcome variable should at least be an interval na scale. Okay? That's the time we use the independent sample t-test, and I hope nasundan yung paano siya gawin using both Excel and JASP. And the most important thing is the interpretation. Questions? Clarifications? Meron ba?